It is such a privilege to be able to speak today on the power of faith, tech, and personal calling. I welcome all of you today as we really have a conversation. And I definitely welcome you to bring in questions, even as I share some things that the Lord has been putting on my heart. And so first, I just want to open with focusing on what really matters. Big and lasting impact for the kingdom happens not because of these bombastic or grand steps, but by being consistent on matters that really matter. And especially in this world today where we need more focus than ever, I really want to focus us on 4 major themes. First, prayer and consistent seeking matters. Being intentional in listening and pressing into what the Lord is calling you into. Second, simple obedience and willing to take risks matter. Third, taking the Great Commission seriously matters. And finally, networks matter. Friendship and partnership built on trust. And so I hope you'll all hear and journey with me today as we really look into what has unlocked my personal calling and what I believe will also unlock yours, wherever you are. And so first, we'll just dive in. Prayer and consistent seeking matters. What I've come to find in my own personal journey is that global mission begins in the heart. We often think of global missions as this big thing that is just all over the world, but we don't realize that it truly, truly needs to begin in our heart through prayer, through listening to the heart of the Father, through intimacy and developing a heart for a broken world. And I'll share a lot more about my own personal journey in this journey of that I'm still on of listening and learning. And as it begins in the heart, things begin to transform in your mind, where things that you thought about yourself, things you thought about the world, lies and barriers that are meant to be broken as the truth and the word of God sets us free. And so that's something that happens that I've found in my personal journey. And then you find your own body shifting and changing as there's obedience and stepping out in faith. But truly, I really want to root us in here, which is global mission begins in the heart. And so I'm going to start off sharing a little bit more about my journey in understanding global missions and also how technology was a part of that story. So it really began in college and university. Not far from here and where I am currently in the Bay Area. I really began praying in my junior year with 2 other sisters. I remember being on our knees, just praying for a nation that we all had a collective heart on. And so that was a year of just getting up once a week, praying together. Little did I know that would sow so much of the stories and the fruits and the testimonies that you'll hear today. I do remember when I actually found myself in that nation years later, when I was seeking confirmation of God, am I supposed to stay here? And I went on a 1-week fast. And I remember as I was pressing in and asking God, a friend that I had not heard from for a long time reached out to me and she said, I just thought of you and I wanted to send you this verse. And it was a verse about how Abraham went to a place that he did not know and how God provided for him as he went in faith. And how that led him to be a father of faith. And it was just, for me, it was a confirmation I had been seeking. And it was just within that week of seeking the Lord and finding him, confirming that. And I remember another moment also in that nation when I was just, again, pressing in and saying, God, am I supposed to stay here? Is this where I'm called to be? And I remember standing in an orphanage, holding this little boy, and all of a sudden, God just put all these memories in my mind as I remembered that he had actually placed this heart for orphans, placed this heart for this nation way early on when I was very, very young, and how the memories of just how he's weaved together all these things. And yes, that his heart purposes were for me to journey with him. And so I can definitely say in my years since university, I have been on the seeking and pressing in, intentional asking of the Lord of his heart for me and for the world. And that has made all the difference. And so I just really encourage all of us, first and foremost, prayer and intentionally listening to God of his heart and pressing in is the first step, for me at least, for global mission. Second, This idea around simple obedience and willingness to take risks matter. And I say this because coming from, I would say, I've definitely won a first world country, but being in so many senses, the 1% of the world, we are the rich young ruler. And I love this quote from one of my favorite authors, Mark Batterson. He says, "If Jesus Christ is not Lord of all, he is not Lord at all." And for those of us who have been blessed with just the wealth, the understanding, the equipping that we could do anything, there is this temptation that we are the Lord of our own lives. And one thing that God has continually challenged me in when it comes to global mission is um, really breaking down and basically dying to my own ego, dying to my own pride, and dying to what I think I should be doing and plant my plans, and the submission to the Lord. And I love there is some really amazing missionaries that have gone before us, saints that have gone before us, and this reading this quote had really struck me when really thinking and praying about this idea of obedience in the Lord. A century ago, a breed of missionaries packed their belongings in a coffin. They burnt their boats when they reached the shores. They were dead even before they died. And this idea that we are on this earth not for our own achievements or purposes, but that we're called to die, and we're called, and a seed that is sown dies and therefore is able to bear much fruit. That there is something to be said about what we're called to in obedience and taking risks for the kingdom. And so was something that really struck me in my journey of really seeking and asking God, what does it mean to truly follow after you? On the epitaph of this missionary who just lived and died in South Pacific Islands, and said, when he came, there was no light. When he left, there was no darkness. And so I just want to share really vulnerably about my own walk in learning how to walk in obedience and taking risks. And I mean, I can definitely say that there's some highlights, and then there's a lot of lowlights. There's a lot more lowlights of where I was afraid and I didn't take the risk. But I do want to take some concrete examples of, at least for me, what it looked like in my journey in global local missions. So first, so as Lori mentioned, I've worked in a few Fortune 1 to 100 tech companies. And there was a moment I was in the Bay Area, and I had an opportunity to go abroad. And actually, this is a moment where I said, no, thank you. I was like very comfortable with being here and being in the US and not going. But they actually forced my hand and said, oh, we just need you to go for 3 months. It's a rotation, just go. And so I remember stepping foot in Asia in a particular city for the first time in my entire life. I didn't know a soul there. And God just opened the door of me understanding his heart for this nation, understanding his heart for these people. And I just ended up falling in love with the city and what God was doing. And again, I would say obedience, but more so maybe that was more of like a little bit of taking risk, leaving a place I was very comfortable in, and where my friends and network were. And then I do remember another story where in that same place, I was given a tutor as an expat. And we were having conversations, and I felt like the Lord asked me, like, ask her like what she thinks the purpose of life is. And I remember asking her, like, just having a conversation, what do you think the purpose of life is? And the girl, she was an amazing local like tutor. She had tats like all over. And at first I was quite intimidated by her, which is why like it took a risk for me to like engage in that level of conversation. But it ended up being this amazing conversation about what life, like what was the purpose of life, and how she came from a background which was very, very dark, and how she had tried committing suicide multiple times since she was 8, through the darkness in her life, and how she now believes that the purpose of life has to be around something that is eternal and something around love. And again, like this was not me putting words in her mouth. And we ended up engaging, and she asked me like, what do you want to study? And I actually ended up asking her if we could study the Bible as part of my lessons. And so through that, she actually ended up personally coming to faith. She herself completely transformed, just again, like light in the darkness. And for me, it was just such an amazing moment of experiencing the power of just taking a very small, just one question, and seeing how that shifted. And I'll share another one in the workplace where in my office, again, in Asia, I was getting coffee, and this woman next to me was the head of marketing. And I looked at her and I felt like the Lord was pressing on me, ask her if she goes to church. And I was like, oh man, this is gonna be so strange. I'm just a stranger going up to her. And I asked her, I was like, so do you go to church? And she looked at me and she wide-eyed. She says, how did you, I do go to church. And she's like, I've been praying for another believer in the office. It's just been such a hard and toxic place for me. And I was thinking of leaving unless God placed another believer here. And we ended up striking up a really special friendship. And through that, we ended up evangelizing and praying and experiencing so many testimonies of people in our office coming to prayer groups with us, and seeing a few of our colleagues actually come to faith in the office. But it really was, again, tiny risk, little risks that God honored, and we saw, again, so much fruit in. And then I do remember another moment in my workplace where I was asked, I felt like the Lord was like, I had been given a bonus. I felt the Lord was like, give it to an orphanage. Someone was in need. And I remember I did it. It took a while. I ended up doing it. And I felt like the Lord so honored that I walked away with so much joy from that opportunity. And so I would say, like, I'm still on this journey. Like I still have challenges growing as a risk taker, but I feel like that is something that God really has pushed me in my own personal journey. Thirdly, I really want to talk about how the Great Commission seriously matters. And I think the reason why is because I feel like in global missions, we often go into the how and what we should be doing, tactics. But really, what really matters, as a marketer, we always ask the question, why? And I think for us as believers, this passage really struck me. In Matthew 28:16-20, it says, therefore go and make disciples of all nations. So the mission of Christians isn't just to make disciples, but to make disciples of all nations. And I think the reason why, when I think about it, it's because Jesus died to purchase people from every tribe and tongue and nation. He died to win his bride, which is the global church. And so that why is actually what makes all Christians called to care more than just about just making disciples, but truly what it means. And David Platt has this amazing quote. He says, a high view of God's sovereignty fuels death-defying devotion to global missions. And the way that breaks out is, one, we believe that local ministry and local missions are totally necessary. However, what we're seeing today is that global missions is tragically neglected. And we as the marketplace have a unique privilege and responsibility to lead the way when it comes to global missions. And as Michael O has said right before me, he said, I believe that one of the greatest moves of God is going to be through believers in the workplace, the next great move of God. And so I really just encourage all of us who are in the marketplace right now to really take the Great Commission seriously. And that could begin with, for me, it began with reading missions books. It came with experiencing the Great Commission coming to life when I first went abroad, and a local sister asked me, a local friend actually that I had just met, she asked me to come to church with her, for her to come to church with me, because she said, I had never heard anything about the gospel. I want to come with you to church. And I was like, okay. And when she came to faith, that moment for me showed me just all the things I had read and learned about how the Great Commission actually can come to life when just one person that you see in a different country come to faith. It's just mind blowing. I can't explain. And this last piece, which is really around this global network, this idea of networks matter and friendship and partnership built on trust. And so I really want to share, like, when I think about Paul, right, and how he had this amazing opportunity where he just had friends all over, right? He had friends in strategic cities, and that is really how catalytic missions really thrived. And I think there's something really unique about the marketplace, and that we're all about, people hate us because we call about networking, right? But I feel like networking can be redeemed for the gospel. The marketplace is the greatest mission field, it's been said. But what they don't realize is that the marketplace is also the greatest mission force. And I think I just want to give some really initial thoughts on why. The tech industry, when we think about it, we are trained in global things, thinking on global scale, to think about global cultures, to see sin at scale in society, to really think about constant change, crisis response, apostolic entrepreneurial mindsets, and a global network and connections. We are trained in this. And we are uniquely positioned to take the gospel to the ends of the earth, to make disciples of all nations through technology, platforms, connections with governments and nations, understanding how to pray and intercede for nations and regions, and to navigate in these unprecedented times, to create and innovate during crisis, and to connect the global body of Christ. And so truly, this idea of relationship is the root and global movement is the fruit. Is something I really would love to lead us all in. And so just to really close, right? Networks matter. I look back on my journey of just the amazing friend networks that the Lord has given to me, and the catalytic relationship that we've been on. So I really just take these four: prayer, consistent seeking matters, taking the Great Commission seriously matters, simple obedience and willingness to take risks matter, and finally, networks matter, building on relationship and trust. And so my encouragement to you is to pray confidently for the spread of the gospel to all peoples, go intentionally to all peoples, to give and die sacrificially, and finally seek friends, like-minded friends on mission. And that is my great prayer and call to all of you today. So thank you so much, and so happy to be able to share my heart with all of you.